Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Seeking Truth. Finding Rob Decker. Here we go. Looking forward to technical troubles with Rob Decker. I hope not, but it always comes out the same. Ah, I see him watching. How do I do this again? Oh, so Rob, you're watching. Now I've got to figure out how to invite you. Add. Okay. This might be the thing. Frank's been taking care of this for a while because mine bugs out regularly. Adding, it says adding. Now we're going to see how Rob's set up.
We're
There we
good?
go.
We good?
Yeah, it
Right on,
worked.
man.
This thing never works the first time, I'm telling you. I've had like three or four kind of meetups with people. Every time, like 4 or 5, like fail. I'll
Right.
try again some other way. That works. All right. How you doing, though?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, bro.
Yeah, me too, me too. I was saying these sort of things. It's new for me, but hey, like it was sort of like, hey, why not reach out? Sean was sort of like, reach out to other people in the group, as it were, to start, this little group as we're in right now.
Absolutely.
I was like, why not? Let's see what happens. It's on the other side of the world. So
Absolutely. Well, it's
and
3 hours away. We're good. It's about 3 hours difference, so you're
that's
good.
it. That's it. Like I come from Alberta actually, so I was thinking about that. We're 2 hours difference in time zones,
Are we?
and it's about a
I
4 hour
thought we were
flight.
three.
I mean to Alberta, yeah, the other side of the mountains, as it were.
Okay, hey, works for me.
Anyways, so while I'm there, I'm like a 2 hour flight away, but that's far away. Anyways, yeah.
Well, I'm in Southern California, and I'm going to assume that's a little bit warmer here than it is over there.
Actually, I was just trying to like pick up a snowbank to show you, but they're all gone. Oh, there's one way over there behind that car, but
That's cool.
no,
Snow
it's
doesn't flatter
melting.
me at all. Snow does absolutely nothing for me. We're good.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I'm glad to be kind of out of it. Like we're in t-shirt weather. I could sit here in the car without it running so that I don't freeze to death.
For sure.
Yeah. I just come over here like I stay in Ottawa here and I've got a place, but on these
Yeah.
kind of occasions I just park right beside it and get Wi-Fi through the window, and then I can come and go pretty quick.
Oh,
And
right on.
yeah, so you know, but yeah, just to say hi. I don't know. I don't imagine we're gonna get into a lot of deep stuff today, but just break the ice as it were, or say make sure the connection works.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, if this, yeah, whatever you want to talk about, dude, I'm totally all in. I'm all game, man. And it's been a pleasure getting to know Sean as well, and he was going through some things, and it's nice to
Mhm.
see where he's going with all that too. So, very fortunate to have met him as well.
Yeah, and that's like, and you're not like, as I mentioned to you in the text, just that, it's not every day that you have someone that's just so honest, like just boom, right out there in your face with like, this is what I did wrong in my life. Usually, it's that getting to know
Well,
that
yeah,
backstory of all these guys, it just makes it so much deeper. Where on the surface, you might see one thing, but as soon as you get down to it, but like, as I said to you, I'm like, wow, I know a lot of, or what I said, but I'm like, I know a lot about Rob Decker, and he doesn't like, no.
well, I think in order for me to make an impact on individuals, it's like you have to be pretty transparent about all the things that have gone on and what's going on, and
Yeah.
um, you have to be real. It's interesting because a lot of people be like, I felt like I met you before I actually met you, or that I knew you before I actually knew you, and
Yeah.
obviously I'm doing something right. That's kind of what you want to do. That's
Absolutely.
kind of what you want to put out there, so that it opens up people to share
Yeah.
and receive.
I totally believe that. Like, it's a give and take. Like, if I want to learn something about someone else, I got to give them something really.
Yeah,
And the rawer I give it, the more they seem to like reciprocate. Like they'll give you
yeah, for
something
sure.
deeper too if you're willing to like take that first step and just go deeper. But yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, like yours is powerful. I was listening back last night, especially to those audio pieces and the videos that were on your site, and just like every time it starts like, Rob, holy crap, your story, like it really gets right down to it, right? And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
one of
yeah.
those, so it's good. And I don't know, I thought about that. I'm like, well, I probably won't do the same thing. You're like, Rob, tell us your story again.
I'm like,
It's
just
like,
just go to the
visit
website,
Rob
man.
Baker
Just go to the
Seats.
website and then ask me whatever questions you want to ask me from there. How about that?
That's it.
I don't
That's
mind
it. You know,
sharing. I don't mind sharing. It's crazy though because a lot of times, I am telling the same thing over and over and over again, and it's always fun when you have a host or someone else that wants to kind of take it in a different direction or ask different questions. That's always fun too, because the reality is I get about 30 to 45 minutes to sit there and open up, but you're talking about 40 years of life, and
Mhm.
there's so much to talk about and all that. It's too hard to sum. So basically, I just nail the couple big incidents, and that's about it.
Mhm. Yeah, everyone wants to hear about the Superman incident. That's it,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Or
You
the
know,
lack of
you're right.
Superman.
But again, like we got like just oh man, yeah, exactly. The attempt,
Yeah, the
you know,
attempt
like
at being Superman, it didn't work out
is
too
it
well for
possible?
me.
No, it is not.
Right,
No, but
right.
I was no, but exactly like to get to some of those other details around it. Like I
Yeah.
talked to Frank, and he mentioned a discussion with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe it was offline or something, but just that,
Yeah,
and it gets to that sometimes in the group of more the nuances between how we're interpreting things. And mine is a big
right.
on interpretation, how just in any message we're receiving, not if it's from biblical or otherwise, just like how everyone kind of seems to interpret things not to work for them, but just how messages are somehow individual, despite being, the same printed version, the New International or whatever it is.
Right, right,
And
right.
so he got into it. He says, "Wow, Rob is a lot like Steve." It's like, what do you mean by Steve? Steve is just
Yeah,
like massive rejection of religion or
yeah.
organized religion, as it were. I was
Right.
like, Rob is like Steve. What do you mean by that? And more sort of how you use the Bible. I don't know. Maybe I kind of want to clarify that a little bit, like and more
Um,
not individually, but
I
maybe
don't know. I
less
don't know
in
who
the
Steve is,
organized
but
way.
I think that
No.
I think what Frank is trying to address is, I've done a lot of research, plenty of research, and I'm very strong in my thought with the research that I've done. I can eliminate a lot of stuff based on history and history alone. Different translations of the Bible or the way that the church conducts themselves outside of the Bible. What I try to
Mm-hmm.
do is I really try to seek the truth in all of it, and I dig for those truths. And so I can be pretty passionate about those things where people probably can pull back a lot more with a lot of that stuff, or maybe they just haven't researched a lot of the stuff that themselves. But I believe that through childhood, we've almost been deceived from birth. We're taught about an Easter bunny and a Santa Claus and a tooth fairy, and the truth is that it's kind of ingrained us in us to be deceived and to be lied to. So, instead of me getting
Mm-hmm.
upset at someone else for deceiving me because maybe they were deceived, well, then it's my job to go out there and seek the truth. And so that's what I try to do in all of it, and I try to remain loving and all that kind of stuff because I mean, even with Frank, it's like we're going to have disagreements within our framework of religion and church and everything.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, and I understand that it can be rough sometimes, and I actually was reading, listening to some of those, kind of waiting for some of those moments, but we didn't really get into that. It was more sort of, you followed a little bit how your wife and you came to, do what was it? It was like a baptism in a hot tub or something. I caught that. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, that was kind of cool.
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't
That
know it
was
was
a
possible,
cool.
but it seemed unconventional a little bit, but
Yeah,
perfectly in line with sort of, the actual what you're thinking inside while
right.
you're doing
Well,
it, not
because that's what it is.
you know
Because yeah, absolutely, man. It's really about the relationship with Christ and where your heart is and all that kind of stuff. And you don't have to go through certain channels in order to glorify Him. It's like, hey, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to make that happen, and it honors Him. As long as He's being honored in it, then there's always tradition, right? But there's also your heart, and we just try to have a right heart before Him. And I think it was just kind of cool. My wife and I could get baptized together
Mhm.
the day before our wedding, and it just happened to be a hot tub that was available.
But yeah, no, but then I thought, oh, that's silly. They're not. It's like not, but it not making light of it, but just using it as for you. But I can, you said it in some way, but just how and I can't remember. I'm not all up on the ceremonies, but just
Uh-huh.
what you're actually committing to, if you were, at the baptism or what you're,
It's just a
you know what I mean? Like,
declaration to receiving Christ in your life, a public declaration, right? You're just showing the
that's it.
public, like, hey, I received the Lord, and that's what you're doing. It doesn't have to be in the Jordan, doesn't have to be in a pool at a church, or, it's, hey, this is where we chose to do it, and it worked best for us. So yeah,
Yeah, and it seems to epitomize that too. It's like, they didn't have hot tubs at the time, but it was, based on
they had
the
warm
ceremony of
springs. I'm sure they
water
had
and
warm springs somewhere, right?
yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, hot springs. That was one of the
Yeah,
things. Like I go back home every once in a while, and I have lots of family in BC, like
yeah,
Kelowna and Nelson, BC. So I do
yeah,
this kind of loop. And at one time when I was younger, a cousin shared with me this sort of map, like back before the internet days, of all the hot springs, like the undeveloped ones.
yeah.
And you had to hike to get to them. Like they were not accessible. That's why they weren't developed. But you get
Right.
this like little pool of hot spring, and it was like this treasure hunt. Since when you go to
Yeah,
BC, it's like, oh, look up on a map and find one of those. So yeah, natural hot spring. Sorry, back in
yeah,
the
yeah.
day they could have done that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
that's
I'm
it.
sure. My
That's it.
hot spring just was chlorinated. That's all.
That's it. Didn't smell like sulfur. That's okay.
Right,
But
right.
that's
It's
it.
all
No,
good. Right.
that's it. No, it's interesting. Like I said, Frank said that, and it kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, did I hear that part right? That I thought I know, and then I started trying to look into, well, in all of this, like Frank being Catholic, and we have,
Yeah.
I get some of them, and different denominations of
Denominations.
Protestantism,
Yeah.
and just how, and again, for me, it's that interpretation, how everyone's looking in my mind at the same thing, but from a different
Yeah.
angle, and
Yeah.
and so it's just, but I agree with you too. Don't accept, just ask questions all the time of everything,
Right,
because that
right,
brings it
right.
into context for you. If my dad says that's what works for him. Okay, I'd still be on the farm, right? It's like that didn't work for me. I need to be in
Right.
Montreal. There's at least 2 million people
Right.
on a small island. That's minimum for me. 2 million. Apparently, New York, there's more, so I could go there. But yeah. So
For
no,
sure,
but
for
just
sure.
like to question that. Like for me, it's like no, that doesn't work. Like I like farm work and the physical labor of it, and still
Yeah.
I was gonna say get off on that, but still really like that. But that my brain was kind of like searching out something else. Like I said, I'm in math. It's looking for math,
Right,
which I
right.
found, in different ways on the farm.
Stimulating
But
for you.
definitely,
That's yeah, mass stimulating for you. You're that guy. You're the thinker. You're the problem solver. I get it.
oh,
I get it.
yes, yeah. But a Tigger though, like I have issues kind of at work because I have this, various disorders. That's kind of how
I get it.
that's how I met Sean, I should say. But
Yeah.
one of them being hyperactivity. So just
Yeah, I
bouncing,
get it.
kind of 5 hours a night and 5 hours a night of sleep, and then just go, 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 go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, just still with that, but not a 9 to 5 at a desk, where I do a lot of programming, but in kind of 45-minute chunks, and then boom, move, boom, move. So
Right, right, right. I
it's,
get
yeah,
it.
but definitely, I love that. I love that part of it in my head. I spent a lot of time in my head, which I didn't like, and now it's sort of like, no, don't try and solve things in your own head, because it's like it never grows. You have to bounce it off people, otherwise
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just gets kind of stale, and
Right.
it does. So anyway, yeah, I love that in my head stuff, but I have to
Yeah.
purposefully get out of my head.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. No, I totally get it. I was very similar for many years, and I think that
Mhm.
the more I worked out and stuff like that, like it really helped me. And
Mhm.
even like the whole like my mind constantly running and stuff like that, the fitness
Mhm.
helps me big time. I have like
Yeah.
I call it fitness ADD. It's like where I just can't commit to the same stuff over and over and over again. I have to like there has to be new stimulation. Even if it's
Yeah.
the same movements but in different order, right? Like
I
I just need to
Mhm.
it's just I need to constantly kind of like trick myself or surprise myself and all that kind of stuff. And so I
Mhm.
like to call that fitness ADD. And it works really
That's
well
no, it's
because it
but
sees
that's
great results.
exactly, but that's just how to, and I had to learn how to focus that instead of like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm getting bored, stop, excuse me, and get distracted with something else. It's like, I'm getting bored. Okay, go this way. Go, 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 go.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
just always go forward in, like in your case, the fitness thing, but always
yeah,
be go, 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 go. But like,
yeah,
go, 16 things or whatever, like
yeah.
squats, but do
Yeah.
squats, I don't know, in a different way. I'm trying to imagine
No, I
your
get what you
regime,
I
but I
get what you're
feel
saying.
you mixing up the regime. Yeah.
But I still like, and I'm sure like yourself, like and Sean, you know, we still have our challenges. Like, you know, for me, it's hard to focus on certain things. Like if you bring something to me and for me to sit there and try to focus on something, it's not so easy for me. Like sitting still is not always the easiest
Mhm.
thing for me. So, you know, what I try to do is I try to use these things to my advantage and but I will
Mhm.
still struggle in other areas. So, you know.
Yeah. And I definitely learned to burn that off outside of it, like you say, the sport or just the
Yeah.
physical exercise for me. Because like I added up, it was like if I sleep 5 or 6 hours a night, then I've got 200 hours of awake time. I'm working 50 hours a week, so I've got a lot of time to burn. I better, and just
Yeah.
burning off calories then, and just taking it out too. Like I play volleyball in the winter, not a big
Uh-huh.
outdoor sports thing in the winter, but volleyball indoor in the winter, and just to kill that ball, honestly. Like
Oh, for
just, and
sure.
I'm the one that just like I got the swear words out, but now it's just kind of grunts and weird words, like sort of Tourette's kind of thing.
For
Oh,
sure.
but it feels so good. And
For sure.
before, my issue is like I'll get with it, and I actually ran a couple marathons and did some of this long distance stuff, but not for a few years. Whereas I'm in it, and I feel how good it is for me, and every day it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is great. But then after the race, it's like, oh, I'll take some time off. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah, for sure.
And then I'm off
But
for
you
six
need
months,
to.
right?
But you need to. But
And I got to
it's
get back to
interesting
it.
how endurance sports help they help guys like us. It almost slows us down a little bit to be able to do endurance stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That
Because it's
time
just
to
like I'm not going
meditate,
to
like you
outrun
said.
my thoughts, right? Like,
That's it.
you know, you
I
start getting a
agree.
little fatigued, you know, and things start to slow down a little bit. But yeah, I get it.
But it's again the one where like, mix it up. And I'm just all about everything. I wasn't a training thing, but there were certain markers on the paths.
Yeah,
There's things like hills, just
yeah,
okay, today it's hills, I'm into hills, or today, piss on it hills, I'm just doing what do we call it? Just the intervals or something like this.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Different intervals. I'm
Yeah.
not like marking it or timing it. I'm just like just mix it up. And then if I'm having just a bad day at work or something, just pound it into the pavement, as it were. Or if it's kind
Yeah,
of a good day, we're just having like a stroll in the park kind of run.
yeah,
But
yeah,
really use it for that too. But absolutely, like how to use it to get it out, like the
yeah.
emotion or the overload that it is. And
In
then
a
as
healthy
like you
manner.
say,
Yeah,
also just there was a lot of meditation to that, like
yeah,
breathing. I had
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah,
right
for
in
sure.
breathing and just focus on the breathing because I would breathe wrong and I had to learn what was it? Oh shoot, I can't even remember my rhythm now. But I had to skip one. I had to do 3 steps in and 2 steps out or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Because otherwise I was running empty at 30 minutes or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So just focus on the breathing and just like three and two, or 3 and 4 or
Right.
something like this. And it was
You
just
gotta
like,
find your rhythm and all that kind of stuff because it's easier to come out the
yeah.
gate gunning and,
Oh,
you know, burn yourself out, right? So you gotta find your
mhm.
pace and all that kind of stuff.
I still got that 3 hour marathon in my mind. First one I did,
Dude,
3 hour, 1 minute, 7 seconds.
that's crazy to me, man. That's, you know, I love
Oh
sports and I
man.
love fitness, but that's on a different level for me. I have
Yeah.
no desire ever in my life to run a marathon. It's just not there for me. It's just
After that, well, it was well, he's a cousin. It was actually he got me into it to quit smoking because I was smoking, right? So
Oh,
it's
that's
a
good.
younger age too. And then he got me into that, and so you can't do the two at the same time. But he's like
Yeah.
Iron Man kind of guy, like
Yeah,
Iron
yeah, that's
Man,
pretty tough. Yeah.
15 marathons a year on a light year kind of thing. It's just like, come on, guys. So he got me into this. And then I was so close. It was like that was supposed to be the one I would do in my life. It's like
Right.
I'll try again. So I tried one. I've tried one since, and I got it too fast. It was
Yeah.
like it was kind of May, so we're coming out of a winter training, really hot day or late April or something, and just it's just a furnace. I'm not feeling. I'm just got the adrenaline. Let's go. I'm looking. Oh, I'm gonna hit 250. This is gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
5 gates to the end, boom! Like
Yeah.
this is the wall. And
You
for
hit the
me, it was
wall.
like
Yeah.
ants. It was like ants crawling in my head first, and then up and
Yeah.
down my arms. I'm like, I better stop. Like the year
Yeah.
before, I was at a Montreal marathon, and a guy died 5 kilometers
Yeah.
from the end on an
Yeah.
uphill, and I was like, not worth it. So I ended up
Yeah.
3:30. In that same year, though, there was a 70-year-old guy broke 3 hours, and so I'm like,
Wow.
okay, I've got time. I'll do three
Yeah,
hours
yeah, it's
sometime in my life.
impressive. You
But
know, you got years to train for that and get conditioned for it, for sure. You know,
it
you
is
know,
so
sometimes when we're
painful, though.
younger, we just think that we could do whatever we want, you know, and you
Yeah,
forget that there is a level of training and conditioning that comes with all that kind of stuff. I mean,
yeah,
we could probably power through some things, but at the end of the day, like there is a level of conditioning that you need for that stuff.
yeah. No, it's fun though. So what are you? So you're into like you're not into running. You're not, or you're
Oh,
just
I
like
mean,
a CrossFit
I
weightlifting
run
stuff
all
like
the
this.
time. I don't like it,
Yeah.
but I do it. I do it because it's good for me. I do it because I don't like it, but you know, I usually don't
Yeah.
I don't exceed a 10K. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
excessive running is just gonna, increase injury for me and
Yep.
also lose a bunch of weight that I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
I work very hard to have the muscle that I have, and so I have to find a balance of, running a 10K and maybe a 5K once a week or once every other week,
Mhm.
along with like running hills, and then, I run stairs, and then, taking spin classes, kettlebell work, barbell work,
Mhm.
circuit training, supersetting. Like I always mix it up. Once again, fitness ADD for me. I like to just change my routines up really frequently, so I can keep going with it. And sometimes I push at 100%, and sometimes it's at 60%. I got to train within different zones on top of it. So and plus
Yeah.
I play competitive softball as well. So I'm out there doing that as well. You know.
Yeah. But it's about consciously mixing it up. Like you've
Yes.
decided every like month or something or every day or whatever. It's just like
Well,
don't fix myself. Like just I want to do legs, so it could be stairs, it could be hills, or it could be like is that kind of mixing up or just on a weekly
yeah,
basis maybe?
yeah. A lot. I do a lot of the same things because I do so many different things, but over a long period of time, at the end of the day, it's the same things. It's just at what
Mm.
intensity or at what length am I going to do these things? Or,
Okay. Putting an order.
that's how I mix it up. You just take the things that you already do and either make them more intense or increase the time of it, or
Hmm.
I just every day is a new day for me. I don't go into the next day really knowing what I'm going to do all the time. Maybe
Hmm.
sometimes, but hardly ever. I kind of like to surprise myself, right? Okay, this is what I'm doing today. These are the movements I'm going to do. This is how hard I'm going to work. And that's kind of how I keep it fresh.
Yeah, that's good. But at the same time, yeah, no, that's good. No, I see the value in that mixing up. But at the same time, you're training other people. Like, is
Yeah,
that your thing?
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a
that's
personal
so
trainer.
is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And
I train
that's a
other
whole different
people, and
level. Yeah,
yeah,
education, those kind of things,
yeah.
motivation. Yeah.
For sure. Well, and two, it's accountability. For a lot of people,
Mhm.
they just need the accountability. They need someone else to be there. And,
Mhm.
for me, you know, personal training is a lot deeper than programming for someone or teaching them how to commit to a movement properly. It's a friendship. It's a relationship. You become family, a friend, just someone that they can
Mhm.
turn to, and so it's more
Mhm.
dynamic than just the um, actual physical portion of personal training.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. Like, there's something wrong with my X part of my body, and they got to tell you why, and it might be somewhat personal, or just that again, you're
Yeah,
you're working on. They really want to be a better person, so they come to you to be that just that person they want to be. That they want to run a 3 hour marathon or whatever, or just get in shape. No, I could
well, a
see
lot of
that. Like I did
people.
teaching. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
I was
just
gonna
that I
say,
did some teaching, but in math, but just that
uh-huh.
I learned it so much better myself, like
Yeah,
reflecting it off other people. And then
yeah,
the same thing, like you see other people's scheduling or their auto motivation, and that refines your own. It's someone
right.
said to teach is like to learn twice, you know what I mean? And so that,
Absolutely. Well, that's
just,
what it is, and I really like to take the things that I learn and make it my own, right? Like I'm not going to be somebody else. And, with my
Mhm.
whole broken back situation, like I have a different level of understanding when it comes to being patient
Mhm.
um, and and um, and just the empathy when someone
Mhm.
has been through a traumatic injury. Um, because not everyone understands that. It's one thing to
Mhm.
read in a book and to be like, well, you can service this kind of client, based on the education that we provide you in this literature. But the truth is, experience some of this stuff yourself, you truly don't know. And so I'm very grateful
Mhm.
for, everything that my body's been through because I get it. I understand. I have a client who, she fell downstairs, broke her jaw, lost her memory, had to learn how to walk again. And this was a long
Ooh.
process for her, which is very similar to the process I went through, and with her, it's
Mhm.
like, sometimes it's two steps forward, four steps back. And, but it's just being there for her and understanding and being compassionate. And, my game plan changes with her all the time. It's like, okay, well, we're just going to go for a walk in the hills on this nice sunny day, right? That's basically all we're going to
Okay.
do because I see that's all that she uh, can receive that day. So it's
Mhm.
my job to kind of discern those situations and to work. with people through that.
Yeah, no, and I understand what you mean, the empathy thing. There's the just that what it takes to, to do any situation. You made me think of my aunt who had a very disabled son for some time. He passed away, but then, she was saying one time, sometimes, and she's a teacher too of elementary kids, and the parents come in with their complaints about, oh, I'm having such troubles, and oh, it's such time. It's like, like sort of like, their complaints are coming from you've been through something that you can kind of see the level of anxiety or whatever it is
Yeah.
much clearer because you've been like 6 miles beyond it. This kind of thing, physically and physical
Yeah.
recovery. That's what it's making me think of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, it's very interesting too because I can't compare my trauma to anyone else's trauma because if
Mm.
someone's only been here and you've been up here, like for them
Mhm.
this is their up here, right? Like so,
Mm.
you know you try
Fascinating.
to
Yeah, yeah.
you just try to you try to remain understanding and all that. What makes me laugh sometimes is when someone tells me how their back hurts and I'm just like, after all the trauma my back's been through, it's just like, oh, you want no back pain, huh? Like let's talk about back pain.
Yeah, true.
But
Yeah,
you try to stay understanding of all that kind of stuff. And
yeah,
we've lived different lives and had different walks and different struggles and challenges, and you just try to remain humble and all that stuff and understanding. And sometimes it's hard work. Sometimes it's hard work,
yeah,
trying to get on someone else's level because you just want people to get it sometimes, and they don't always get
yeah.
it.
Yeah, no, I like the points. Like they're just that, that a back can take more than, a little bit of a crick, and you can keep moving,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But at the same time, I like the other thing you said. Like everything is, there's a certain relativity to it. Like a
Yeah,
person's worst moment, a worst trauma, is their worst trauma. That's 10 on the scale, right? No matter
right.
what the incident
That's their
is, that's
10.
the
Yeah,
10, and
that's their
everything
10.
goes down from there. So that your 10 is, So I agree with you. Like when you see that, it's like, oh, this person's in a 10 or a 9 or a,
Hmm.
in whatever situation of recovery too as they come back. So that, yeah, exactly. I agree with that too. Not to diminish what someone's suffering is, because
Yeah, yeah,
everyone's
yeah,
suffering is
for
somewhat
sure. Yeah, yeah,
equivalent. It just, it's a different experience. Yeah. So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. So those are the
yeah,
challenges that you take on as, trying to take the personal part of personal training really serious.
yeah. Oh yeah, I see. Yeah, the first
Yeah,
word of it. The
yeah,
second part is
person.
training. First is
Yeah, it's
personal. Ah,
training,
I
right,
like it
right.
that way.
Well,
That's
I mean,
good.
I think that when people talk about personal trainers, you think of the generic like, dude, lift this and lift that and do this and do that, and you kind of get like, you know, the fitness enthusiast, right? That wants to get people to pick stuff up and put it down. So, you know,
Yeah.
um, my job's pretty it's pretty awesome. It's pretty deep.
You see that sometimes. Like I went to a gym just one time. I didn't like the gym, but just for training
Yeah,
on marathons, I needed something in the coldest months. So
yeah,
it was a month or two I did that. Didn't like it, but just to see that there's some people that are just like, they got the employee jersey on, but they're just saying, okay, 10 more, 10 more,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
squatting. It's pretty empty. It's just the training part, a lot less the personal part, I thought.
yeah,
But no, that you absolutely need the personal because people quit gyms all the time. It's like a
yeah.
99% dropout rate because
It's
the
pretty high.
personal
Yeah,
side isn't there.
it's pretty high. But everyone goes through seasons too. Sometimes maybe they need you for a few seasons, and then all of a sudden,
Mhm.
like, they need a break from it just to maybe even realize that they really need it again. It's like anything.
Yeah,
Sometimes you have to walk
yeah.
away from it to understand how important it is for you. And it's interesting because humans are interesting, right? People are very
Oh,
interesting. And so, you know,
yeah.
um, I've just seen so much in the fitness industry and with people, and people will just be people, man.
Yeah. And they are fascinating. And it's just
Yes, they
weird, like
are.
just how
I agree.
people think about things. It's like, I get in arguments, and I really learned, especially some of these, things in the group. Like we had just really different points of view on a lot of things.
Well, I'm
It
sure.
starts
I'm
off,
sure.
it's arguments, but really just kind of a forgiving, but just sort of like, okay, we'll talk about something else. We'll work on it. We'll talk about it better. That is not sort of we fight about something that's, really morally to the core, as it were, and now we
Right.
can't talk again. It's like,
Right.
anyhow. So yeah, just the importance of that personal side of the thing to get to it, like to create that attachment, to create and again, I'm still here 4 months later where I almost got kicked out like twice, right? But again,
Yeah.
we bring it back together. We have calming voices in the group and less
Right.
calming voices.
Well,
So,
I can see
but
that,
just
there's
learning.
there's definitely different personalities in the group, and
Mhm.
you know, and we're all, the crazy thing is we're all in a different place when it comes to our walk with God. And you know, some people are very fresh. Some people have been churched up their whole life. Other people, you know, came to Christ in a different way. And, you know, and
Mhm.
everyone starts somewhere. And there are going to be a lot of conflicting thoughts and ideas and beliefs amongst people. You know, we all learn from somewhere or someone. You know, a lot of times we don't actually get into the word ourselves, but we follow a pastor or follow a church or follow
Mhm.
a certain type of thought and or our own kind of manis, was we manifest our own version of who God is in our mind. And you know, and all those different places can lead into conflicting belief systems.
Yeah, and I can see it. I can see it, and how it. Yeah, it definitely can. I found that, and the Steve that we talked about, again,
Yeah.
someone who was briefly there. It was in fact only me that had a few conversations with him, and the
Uh-huh.
last one went badly, where it was like, all you. Anyways, he did not like. Anyway, it didn't end well, but
Right.
since then it's been more denominational sort of things, and
Right.
especially, I used to go into sort of the atheist theist debates on YouTube, but
Right.
found out that a lot of the hottest debates are sort of Protestant on Protestant in terms
Yeah, it's
of,
Christian
you
on
know,
Christian for sure.
Calvinist, non-Calvinist, and everyone's like, no,
Yes.
this has to be right. And it's not like
Right.
you can't, not that you can't do what you're doing, Rob, but it's sort of, there are definite people that would say, no, no, now you're, it's not subjective. You really need to come in line with more people that are doing it together. And so, anyways, that there's different ways, but those are the hottest ones when it's like we're so
Right.
close, but there's something different about the Trinity or
Well,
something about this and
Christianity
this,
can be
and it's
very,
like bam, slam difference,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, people, you know, Christianity can be very cliquish, and you have to understand that, like, are these man's ideas through his interpretation of the word, or is this Holy Spirit led biblical truths? And that's what it has to
Mhm.
come down to. And so, you know, I think the downside to arguing with people is that someone wants to win the argument, and
Mhm.
it's not about winning the argument, right? You're not gonna,
Right.
if you have a certain stance and I have a certain stance, I'm not trying to, you know what? You need to go out and do your thing, and I need to go out and do my thing, and we need to, and it just has to come down to, is it biblical? Is it really biblical?
Oh,
You know,
yeah, for that
and
one.
take it from there. You know, I try not to do, I do my best not to follow you know, the church, every single church or denomination was created by a man, right? And so there's usually flaws in their process of thinking or their interpretation of the word. And so, you know, you kind of just, you know, take it for what it's worth, man. And at the end of the day, we have to be the ones seeking the Lord, and we have to be the ones opening up the word and doing the research.
Yeah, and I agree that there's a lot of, it's almost easiest and funnest to go for the disagreements, or well, easiest
Yeah,
anyways. You want to
yeah,
have that, or at least when there's a debate, you want to win that, and so it's like it's more interesting. But there's so much agreement, like again, Frank and
yeah,
I started this hotly, even recently. You said like the interpretation of the Bible, but really, we started in just 2 episodes. We had one last night on the Second Amendment. We do not see
right,
eye to eye, but he did it
right.
beautifully at the end. He says, "I'm going to summarize what we agree on." It was like,
Hmm.
and we went through it. It was like, oh, we're actually really close. This is like something we
Right,
should probably deal with this sort of, and we found like solutions that both of us could get on board with and things of, say,
right.
if there's any kind of problem with mental illness and links with these things. It
Yep,
was just that sort of thing. What's the worth in arguing if we want to find, we want to get to the solution first, not who's right or something. It's like, okay, what do we
right.
have an agreement and then move with that? And it's harder to do.
Yeah,
It took us 4 months, but we went to the Second Amendment, which is, I don't know, hot kind of, U.S. and
right
Canada
now, yeah.
differences.
Super hot right
Even
now.
just
Yeah,
general, like I'm not an extreme. I'm from Alberta, right? Rural
yeah,
Alberta. We're the most gun-toting Canadians, and still I'm like far to the left of, the sort of Second Amendment
right.
NRA stuff. So, but we managed to find that agreement, and really had, it ends much. The first on the Second Amendment, we had a first conversation, didn't go well. I came
Right,
up with a
right.
statistician like, pride bubble. It's like, no, I know all the statistics. I know everything.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That did not go well. Anyways, the second one, I brought it back. Don't be prideful and don't look for disagreement.
Yeah,
Why? We could find more agreement than we.
right.
So that was a long answer to another question. But yeah, on biblical interpretation too, it just seems there's so much in agreement. Why don't we just go with that? And like, are you living the golden rule? I am too. And so if you want to believe that thing, between your conversations with God, okay, but don't. Anyways, yeah, that's. But I don't understand. I don't see the need for an argument necessarily.
Right. Well, sometimes arguing it can be healthy, but if you're really looking for a winner, right, then maybe it's just not so much.
That's it. And like just debating
You know, it,
versus arguing, it's
it should
almost
draw
like
you
that.
closer to God. It should draw you closer to God and to His biblical truths. And if it doesn't, then what's it doing?
What is it doing? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. No, I believe that too. Like, what am I doing right now? Even if I'm doing religious debates, is it bringing negativity to the world if I'm just shouting my
Well, I'll say
opinions at
this,
people and
man.
they
I'll
tell me
say this.
them?
The gospel is offensive. You can't get around it. God has His truths, and His truths can be offensive. Not everyone's going to agree with the word, and so that can be taken on as negativity, right?
Right.
We should always stand firm in His truths, and we're not always going to make friends in that process. Actually, it's going to create division, and those were Jesus's words. It will create division. So,
We will create division.
we saw what
Yeah,
happened to him, and you have to expect that from us. We can't ride both sides. You just can't. So,
yeah. No, and that's fine. Like I was saying I was with Jerome, and he was doing some, just handing out tracts and doing some street ministry stuff. And I
yeah,
wanted to go out with him, like really to hit because we talk about Jesus comes for the downtrodden, as it were. So really, it was like, okay, I really like that there are people, shooting up heroin right now that it's like maybe they'll see a tract and say, hey, maybe there is kind of something
good.
better, and that might be
Right,
what saves them. So I was all for that.
right.
In the end, we didn't. It, in the end, we rocked around more a richer neighborhood and handed out these things. So it was not exactly what I had in mind, but it was that side of it is great, which is where it's just like preaching to people that are like holding hands and their families are walking down the street, they're all smiling. It's like there's a message to save you. It's like they don't take it that well. I get like frowns, and I was like, oh, that's
Well,
not what I want to do. Whereas
it's
like something what you said about starting with like more personal relationship, I think on one of the podcasts, I mean, and
I'm
then
sure.
if it comes up, if the gospel, if there's an entry for that,
Yeah, yeah,
that's what it is. Like you see, oh,
yeah.
maybe they need some help or just a passage, not even overtly, but just a philosophical idea maybe that you pick out from, that kind of thing, rather
Right.
than sort of let's start with Genesis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How to do it. There's definitely a how
For
to do
sure.
it, like being a discussion more than an argument is all I'm saying. But I see
Right,
how it
for
goes to
sure. Well,
argument, and I don't think it convinces a lot of people. That's it. But anyway, sorry.
no,
Go
no,
ahead.
arguing is not going to, because an atheist is going to take his stand too, and so,
Yeah.
kudos to you guys for passing out tracks, and that's cool, and that's planting seeds, and you have to understand that, people are going to be resistant to it, and that's just what that is, and people that tend to be in a lot more affluent areas, um, you know, uh, it's a little bit different than someone who's homeless on the street. Everyone has their own issues and their own struggles, and just because someone's smiling doesn't mean that they're truly at peace or have joy in their life, and maybe they still need to hear.
No,
So,
no, no.
so you,
But
you
how to
guys,
get to them, it might be more through the personal trainer than it can attract with maybe a place to go get help kind of thing.
it could
That
be a simple
just each one
conversation,
a
right?
message. Like it might
Yeah.
just be that. Yeah.
Yeah, it could just be a simple conversation, man. Just a simple display of love and appreciation. And, because at the end of the day, it's not so much what we have the ability to do, but it's more of who lives inside of us. And, for us not to do it out of our own flesh, but, do it because He's led us to do it. It's so easy for us to get in the flesh and like, this is the mark I'm going to make for God, da da da, and and we can really push people away and get away from what the Lord really wants us to do in those moments. But that takes time and spiritual maturity to get to those places,
Sure.
if that makes
Yeah,
sense
no,
for
and
you.
I think a lot of like reflection. I think that there was a long time that I didn't do that reflection on, just what was important. What are those core beliefs? It just says, yeah, no, I have core beliefs. I'm a good, golden rule.
Right.
Let's go with that. Whereas just, you know, trying to get down to it, where I come in not religious, as it were,
Yeah.
not atheist, but as I found out later, I get labels and stuff, pantheist, and
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
general revelationist, I think I'd be called. And so, whereas, I'm big on that general revelation. Again, growing up in the muck, as it were, kind of just seeing the beauty all around, and like that's just sort of where I find inspiration, and mostly a big part my son, inspiration of just like applying that golden rule every moment of every day and just trying to use my weirdness for good in the world. Like you were saying, like you just got a certain kind of maybe charm, a little kind of like people like I'm 6'5", 6'6", so
Yeah.
people look up to me to use that, and I know that
Yeah.
has something. So it's it's about focusing on positiveness, whereas again, like interpretations of things. Whereas I think I had one thing I said flippantly or something like I say speak to or like communicate. I have a relationship with God, who is Jesus in some senses. You have a relationship with Jesus, who is God in some senses. I think we're talking the same person, as it were, in a flippant way, but just trying to find agreement in terms of underlying, beliefs, but having these discussions. Like, I don't know if you checked it. I have like these hundreds of hours of videos with these guys, but it took all
Yeah.
that to kind of like, you know, iron sharpens iron. And again, I think Jesus is a perfect message for the meek, the poor. And that's what I bring out of it, is that, if I can pass that track to someone who is about to fall right into like death, say, or like overdose, or just keep going down a bad path, and they might find a good place in a church, whereas I hadn't found that myself. I think that was the positive. That is an excellent thing. And that's why I was going out with Jerome, is just to pass that. Though, just lay it out there a bit, just that, while I accept that as a good path, for me, and as I get to, that was the big argument at the beginning, for me, it's just not the only path. That perhaps general revelation is with me and my relationship, and kind of, I went through the whole story of being saved. I have 0 views, but I kind of have this sort of like truth bombs of videos in the sort of those things, and what that means to me, and how I define my path, and these kind of things. But I really had to do that. I had to sharpen it, because before it was these vague kind of meh things.
Well,
why I
they
left the church, these things and whatnot. But yeah. Anyway, so that was a long answer
vague.
to not even a
Well, that's
question.
cool. I mean, vague can touch on a lot of people, but at
Mhm.
the end of the day, like my truth is that it's Jesus and only Jesus, right? Like, we can have some similar frames of thought when it comes to faith, but at the end of the day, for me, it's strictly Jesus, and it has to come back to him, and it will always come back to him. And the truth is that people will walk away from that. They'll look. People will talk about God, but in what sense, on what level, and is it a biblical God? And so for me, I always stay Christ-centered and firm in him. And the truth is some people don't want to hear it but need to hear it, and people are going to walk away from it. People are going to dislike you for it, but the reality is that Jesus was slaughtered by those people as well, and he still loved them, and he wanted eternity for them, and he wanted his Father in heaven to forgive those people for those things that they did not know that they did. And so you have to keep that in mind. The things that he suffered, we may suffer on a certain level with it as well.
Oh yeah, no, and as a person, I think, just absolutely as an example of how to live, I think that speaks for itself in a lot of ways. Like, again, people use the words or interpret things, but I think the person of Jesus, as it were, that's a good example. I guess mine comes down to really the proof for me in Christianity, or the message of Christ, is the people like you, like Jerome, like Sean, who just, and they explain it to me. It's just like, this is what I felt when it was like the sort of saved, when I was down in that dumps. And it's like you say. And then I would come back with, again, my story of the same, so that whereas, some people, again, those people that really have that negative reaction to it, as I say, not necessarily rebelling, but just finding that way, the only access to say the word of God, unless you do it the way you do, is kind of not totally, but just on a more, not solo, but a more independent, that from a local church, as it were, where I grew up in a small community where it's like, that's the way you do it.
I get it. I get it. I get it. Many pastors and many churches probably wouldn't be fond of how I went about things, man.
That's it. But
because man wants man to follow man a lot of times.
And it's unfortunate. And again, that's where it really got me out of organized religion.
Well, that's what that is, right? Organized religion.
As maybe Sean would say, people doing it wrong, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Interpreting it and applying it to people around them in a way that's perhaps breaking relationships rather than trying to build positivity. And so I felt like it was just not perhaps applying the golden rule to people that we disagree with. In a small community where it's very homogenous, I felt it a lot more. So I kind of got out, as it were. but then coming
Right.
around, so it's sort of, and then coming into a shot, it's like, well, you really got to get into this epistemology and these different philosophies to really hammer it home, because it's not entering into my head. It's like, well, at some point I could pass my entire life in philosophy courses trying to get this message, or perhaps the message is that this one is just a little bit too dense for me. I'm not good at reading anyways. I'm more into the
Well,
numbers,
I
so that
think, you
just
know,
sort of maybe
I
there was
think
another
I
path,
think what
and that's
happens.
where my, and again, the fact that I feel as saved, and the stories that I say about Jerome and them, it's like that happened to me too, and I could describe the same kind of like details down to the smell of kind of when these things happen, so that
Yeah,
that same kind of discussion, almost conversation, that relationship, I feel like I've had. So if I'm calling it something different,
right.
it's just like, but I think we're doing the same thing. It's just that we're
Yeah.
calling it something different, and that gets down to the interpretation, the names, and so that's where I'm coming from. Just again, trying to nutshell it a
No,
little
no,
bit,
for
but
sure, for sure. I mean, and I think for some people, they very intellectual, like hyper thinkers, and a lot of times, like, that can conflict with faith. Sometimes faith, you can't put a name or a number or a feeling on it. It's faith is faith. And that's part of having a relationship with God. But I can see the struggles with people like yourself, who's like the superb mathematician, where there's an answer for everything, right? And and you're constantly like trying to work those answers, and but that leaves a guy like you with a lot of questions, and you're still in a process of figuring these things out. And there's no better avenue than actually picking up the Bible itself and really doing your homework. So
well,
and just.
understand, I actually got awards at Bible study. I'm not unfamiliar with the Bible.
Oh, for sure. But
So
there's
that
knowledge,
has
right? And
nothing
then
to that.
there's
But then
relationship.
coming back to it, but it gets down to what you say, like them being different. That part of the brain issues was like these kind of benign brain tumors that they discovered, and then scarring, which is
Right.
essentially like brain damage, where there's missing pieces of brain.
Yeah.
And so
You
it's
do
they
right
said this is
now?
probably, yeah, this was kind of discovered more in the last 5 years after having a big grand mal
Wow, that's
seizure.
insane. That is
Yeah, no,
that is
it
insane,
was
man.
like it kind of played out. It's like not being able to stand, and then afterwards, benching
Yeah, yeah,
six
yeah,
thirty
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. Like, whereas it's like these first 6 months, like they have to scan and scan and scan to say, is it benign or malignant?
Yeah.
Or there was only one at that time, and then they found another one. It was like, what the hell are you talking about? Another one? Oh, we just
Wow.
missed it the first time.
How
Like,
old are you,
we
man?
missed. Oh, fuck,
How old are you?
38,
Oh,
38
dude,
now,
really?
man.
Oh, man.
So it was but then in the scarring they discovered it, but then in the end it wasn't growing, so they said, well, you're probably born with it. My mom has somewhat of a structure in her brain too that she never
Hmm.
told me about. Anyway, so that's probably genetic. And then the scarring, they said probably an infection when I was younger, because I had this kind
Right.
of personality and the math thing the whole life. So it's sort of like it broke, didn't break. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
It's
It's
like
like what gives me
you're
the
like
discussion.
Russell Crowe, you're like beautiful mind over here, bro.
Well, when we're talking to scale autism, like I'm really bad at
Yeah.
languages and math, but no, written languages I suck. But like
Yeah,
over
yeah.
verbal
But you have
and
your
really good at math.
strength.
So autism, but very functional autism. I'm not saying
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, but this kind of thing.
No, no,
So
for
that
sure.
it was like you say, hyper calculating, but then perhaps my brain I'm just gonna hyper calculate these 66 books for the rest of my life and maybe never get there. And perhaps he's like, perhaps he's, him who knows, he figured that out beforehand and said, like, Fraser's going to need a little bit, not an independent, everyone needs a unique path. And so that when,
Well,
and when I read
you
the
just
Bible now,
provide.
it's sort of like, oh, Israel, or for the Israelites. And I know that that's kind of broadening. And I'm not trying to reinterpret the Bible for anyone, but it was just
Yeah.
sort of messages, or in the Catholic Church of Purgatory, that, if I live myself a perfectly good life, I might have a intermediate step before going on. Or there's different kind of, you know what I mean? So I take solace in some Christian passages, as it were, that being general revelation, like just following, the message that's written kind of everywhere, and not just
Yeah.
written in those 66 books, that I find solace in the fact that that's just been hardened. It was like Sean says, like, oh, you're on a path of like those ideas that I had beforehand that were a little bit more fuzzy. It's like, no, I like just in the beauty of the people I see around me every day of different walks of life. It's just like, no, I just can't believe that people like being so loving that I know for, deeply, how can they be going to hell? It's like, yeah, me and God aren't so sure about that. My interpretation with my
I get it.
relationship
I
and
get
this
it. I totally get it. Yeah.
more, not conversations, blah, 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 but you know what I
But I
mean?
get what
Sort
you're
of
saying.
like pushing me towards, we're talking about, anyway, in a bunch of
I get it,
analogies,
man.
but
I mean, I get it. I
that's where
I
I
totally
land
get
at.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But I
mean,
understand everyone's got it, and I just think it's beautiful. Everyone. That's what I said. Like the fact that you were saved like that. We talked about David Wood too. He was like, he
that
could have
guy's
been like a
awesome. I love that
psychopath,
dude. Yeah.
and then you could focus it for good, as it were, rather than
Well,
he could have been
he's
freaking
all
kept
the
the dollar man.
apologetics, man. That guy's on a different level with those apologetics, man. He just,
Oh, yeah.
but he helped a Muslim, find Christ, and and they became
Exactly.
like best friends before his buddy passed away from stomach cancer, and that's a pretty intense story, man. And that's the transformational power of God right there, in someone's
Mhm.
heart, and that's kind of awesome to watch, man.
It is, and the openness of it and the honesty too. That was another thing.
Yeah,
It's like, man,
yeah.
that's just, yeah, that's the way to go. The only way to get like, make people understand anything about, say, sociopathy or sociopath or something is just to say, well, there's one. He's a good guy. We don't have to lock them all up. We can just, maybe they just need to find Jesus, and boom, they have more connection with emotion, as he seemed to state in his thing. But
Well,
just that
it's very
openness
interesting that you say
of
that.
explaining where you come from.
Yeah, well, it's
Go
interesting
ahead.
that you say that because I saw an interview. And I don't know if he was being deceptive or not, but I saw an interview of Jeffrey Dahmer. The guy that like gay guy that murdered kids in America, and
Poured
he
acid
ended
in
up going
people's
to
heads.
yeah, that guy,
Weird, weird.
and then all of a sudden, like, in prison he was sitting down and he's like, you know what? I'm a Christian now and I have Jesus and I never had Jesus, and like, and then he's like pouring it all out there, like if I would have grown up like with Jesus, things could have been way different, but I didn't, and so whether or not that's true or not, I find
Mhm.
that to be like that's what happens when you receive the Lord. Those kind of things start to change. It's interesting when you get taken over by a new creation in Christ, and it will change a person. It will change your thought process. It will change the way that you approach things. It will, and some of these are take time to kind of transform you, and others are kind of like the whole Paul factor when he got knocked off the horse in Damascus. Like it's right away for other people, and so only God knows your process.
No, indeed. I just like, again, I look at that person that frowns afterwards. That, I don't know. I'm just making sure, like, again, that everyone's got a chance, but just that each message got to be maybe right, and that people that might get turned off or do negative things when they see something like Westboro Baptist, and then they devote their life
I
to
get that.
getting rid of
Westboro's pretty rough. Yeah, yeah,
fools or something. Like, then you start getting this tit for tat, and it so that, kind of, we'll say the other side, the atheist, if you will, or someone that wants to be just secular or whatever we term it as, just that they have, I would say, some justification, perhaps through some bad experience or just intellectualizing the nuts out of it, but trying to be a good person every day, all day. But then they focus these things on trying to be negative to the church, which they felt that the church was negative to them. And it gets to be this
yeah.
circle that actually we could all just talk. I had a great ride with one guy. He was a pastor, a Baptist pastor, which growing up, maybe the Second Baptist, those were maybe a little bit more hardcore, as it were.
The fire and
But we had
brimstone preaching
great
for sure.
discussion. We had this amazing discussion, me and this guy, like, about sort of how science and religion and stuff. Like 2 hours it takes Ottawa to Montreal, and it was just like, wow, that was amazing. That I never had that kind of discussion before.
Yeah.
Kind of one of those moments that launched me into saying maybe I could do an apologetics group. Even
That's
though
cool.
in the past it would have got the volume would have gone up a lot faster. It was like, wait a second, there might be a lot of agreement here that
Yeah.
even my, like, pure calculating mind, at least I'm not into determinism or, like, predicting that. Well, I should say I did modeling to predict the future, but I don't believe that it can be done perfectly. That we all have
No.
choices, that you can't calculate, that it is, that we have choice, but that I have this calculating brain, and that this guy can kind of say, what, Christians can be good. They're not going to yell at you for this and that thing. If you find the right ones, as it were,
Yeah.
that don't go to Westboro Baptist, go to,
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
you got to be careful. So, but here's the reality. I mean, the truth is that the enemy will infiltrate church, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the enemy, what he wants to do is he wants to discredit Christianity and wants to discredit Christ. So, that's why you have so many denominations. There can be a lot of misconceptions and a lot of deception. in the Christian church alone. You know, outside of Christianity, it's like the devil feels like he's already got that in the bag. So the next best step is to actually go into those places where they consider them Christians and to totally uh, twist the scriptures and abuse the scriptures and use men and their pride to deliver a message that isn't of Christ, you know, but people follow those messages and listen, just like, you know, the Hillsborough Baptist Church. Like, yeah, you can feel that way because biblically it says certain things, but that's just not how you treat the people. I don't think that Christ would
Yeah.
have ever called somebody a name, bro. You know, like it's just he would have prayed for him, he would have loved on them, he would have poured his love into them,
Yeah.
and that's what he would have done. But I
Yeah,
do
I
have
guess.
to go. I do have to go, my man.
So,
I got my son,
yeah, this is
right? You know how that goes, right?
this is a long
um,
nap right now. Okay, it's been great talking to you though. Yeah,
oh, you too,
thanks
my
for the
man.
chat.
I'm glad that
Yeah,
we finally got to touch base, bro.
for sure. Okay, well, we'll talk again. We'll set something up. It can be in the future, but as it is, like again,
Sounds good, brother.
figure out the day, figure out the schedule, switch it up, keep it interesting.
All right, brother, man. All
Uh,
right, it was a pleasure meeting you finally.
yeah, it was very good. All right, take it easy then.
Talk to
I'll
you soon.
finish
Bye.
this up.